holy crapola, the Toronto Maple Leafs have fired Mike Babcock. Can you believe it? Before we get started, I just want to say you haven't seen me in a while, partly because of work. It's also, I'm trying to be reconstructing my channel, getting in with some graphics on Final Cut, and I'm a bit of a technological boob, per se, so it's been taking me some time. Thank you for your patience. I'm not going anywhere. You can count on it. This is amazing, isn't it? Big news. I know a lot of analysts thought that we're split on if this was going to happen at all or when this might happen. Brian Burke thought the Maple Leafs might at least wait till the end of this road trip to make that decision, see if he could turn it around. Whereas TSN analyst Bob McKenzie was just 50-50 on whether it would happen at all. But there was a lot of talk in Toronto about this, so this isn't really shocking, I guess, that it's happened. It's just that it's happened now. I think even I thought they might wait a little longer, maybe another, again, the end of this road trip. They've lost 6 in a row. And they played Vegas last night. Today's Wednesday, by the way. What day is it today? It's the 20th. And before Vegas, they played Pittsburgh, and they lost, was it 6-1 or something? And they just looked completely disinterested on the ice. It was awful. They had their AHL goaltender who never played an AHL game. I'm not going to even try and pronounce his last name. Kazukuo. I just said I wouldn't do it. He was in that, and they just played awfully in front of him. They just embarrassingly bad. And they acknowledged that. And then they went into Vegas, and they actually played really well. They played like they cared. They actually hustled. There was no hustle in their game from their stars, from no one, really. Well, there are certain players more than others. One might argue John Tavares hustles more than some certain other players, but points-wise, it hasn't shown on the board, and so on and so forth. Matthews, who may not hustle as much defensively, has been doing well on points, and then we can go up and down the lineup. I'm not going to do that. But, I mean, their special teams have been awful throughout this stretch as well. And they replaced those 2 coaches from last year. One of them, who was initially the power play coach, went to the Islanders, who still have a bad power play, I think. And they hired Paul McFarland, who was in charge of the power play in Florida, which was ranked 2nd overall in the league last year. He was fired when they kind of got rid of all the coaching staff and brought in Coach Gwenville there. So Dubas just jumped on him right away, and agreeably so. I remember hearing he was available and thinking, okay, they've got to get this guy, right? And they did. And then, so they put him in charge of offense and the power play, and then they go out and get DJ Smith was their penalty kill and in charge of defense, and he was hired as the head coach of Ottawa Senators, as you know, and then he was replaced by Hackstall, former head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers, which was a curious choice. At the time when I heard this, I was just like, okay, all right, let's see what he can do. I felt like this was more of almost like a Mike Babcock decision more than a Kyle Dubas one for some reason. They even look a little like each other, don't they? They look like they could be cousins. Anyway, Babcock and Hackstall. I mean, so is it the assistants' fault that their special teams suck? Like, they're awful. Their penalty kill is allowed like 12 goals on 11 in the last 11 games or something like that. Just really, really bad, and their power play hasn't been working well either. It's in the bottom, I want to say 4th of the league at the moment, 22nd or something like that. So, how much of that is Babcock's fault, and how much of that is the assistant coach's fault? I'm saying this because the Leafs are retaining the assistant coaches. So they're retaining McFarland, who's in charge of the power play. They're retaining Dave Hackstall, who's in charge of the penalty kill and the defense, and also Andrew Bremer as well. I want to say he's the video coach or something. So as we know, if we go over a little bit of the history here, Babcock was hired in 2015, and his overall record is 173, 133, and 45 in 351 regular games with the Leafs. We all know he took them to the playoffs. He missed. I think they missed in the first year. Obviously, they were last in the league. That's why they got Austin Matthews as that first overall pick. And then the next season, that was Matthews' rookie season. They lost to Washington in 6 games, but I think 4 of those games went to overtime. So that really brought a lot of people's hopes up because they didn't even have. Everyone was surprised they even made the playoffs at that point. And then, of course, the expectation rose, and then they lost to Boston the following year in the first round of the playoffs. And then again last season in the 7th game, again against the Boston Bruins. So, and a lot of those games, you look at choices that Babcock has made and gone, what are you doing? For instance, I'm not going to, dig this hole too deep, but when he, in the 7th game against Boston, in the last couple minutes, whatever it was, he threw on Marleau, who had been struggling in the playoffs and in the regular season in the dying minutes of the game, instead of Austin Matthews, for instance. That's a big one. Or the fact that Mike Babcock, after their team scores a goal, like against the Vegas Golden Knights, he throws on the 4th line right after they score that goal to keep the momentum. I know their 4th line's not bad, but really, you're throwing the 4th line on the ice right after you score a goal and you're trailing to keep the momentum. He makes a lot of weird moves, choices like that. I mean, he's a big line matching kind of coach, and just some of those things just didn't make sense. And he's a very stubborn man, and to a certain extent, a lot of coaches have to be stubborn to be successful in the NHL, right? That they think that their way is going to work. I mean, he has been a successful coach in the past, but I don't think he's won anything past the first round in the playoffs, I want to say since 2013 with Detroit. You can correct me on that. I'm just going off the top of my head. But so as much as I was super excited when the Leafs hired Babcock and thought he was definitely the best coach of the time, they threw a lot of money at him. They got him. They stole him away from Buffalo, who seemed inches away from hiring them themselves. And I was super stoked about that. I mean, he had a lot of success with Detroit, Anaheim before that. He at least won 1 cup, and he was chosen as the head coach of the Olympic team in the World Championships for the last, I don't know, give or take 10 years or so. He's been their man. He's always been behind that bench. So he's had this air about him that he could accomplish anything with anyone, just with hard work and good players. And lo and behold, in a place like Toronto, where they overanalyze everything, I'm from there, I know, especially when it comes to their hockey teams, we started to pick apart a lot of his flaws. And it's not like they were over-analytical flaws. Ha! Get it? Over-analytical Mike Babcock flaws? No? Okay. I'll leave that one. So, a part of me feels sad for the guy. Sad that it didn't work out with him. And I know he's a good man, a good family man, and all this kind of thing. And I'm sure he'll get another job almost, maybe even right away. Maybe he'll wait till next season. I'm sure he'll easily get hired, but he was a frustrating guy to watch coach the team. In the end of things, he didn't adapt. Not like a coach like the Boston Bruins coach, Cassidy. Watch him adapt during the playoffs, during matchups, and during the game. Big difference between him and Mike Babcock. That guy really knows what he's doing. He's ahead of his time. And so now we move on to Sheldon Keefe. Who is this guy? Where did he come from? So here's a little backstory on him quickly. He was a player. He played in a lot of different leagues. He was a right wing. He started playing, well, at least Hockey IMDb says, in 1996. Now he's played in the OHL, the IHL, the AHL, and the NHL, amongst others. The only NHL team he ever played for was the Tampa Bay Lightning, who had originally drafted him as well, whom he played with on varying degrees of games over the span of 3 different seasons, without too much success, really. Now, before we get into his coaching career, one of the backstories of Sheldon Keefe, which kind of made him a bit notorious, not really, but I don't know if you remember the whole thing with was it Mike Danton, formerly the St. Louis Blues, who got arrested and convicted of trying to hire someone to kill a hitman to kill his former coach and was it Robert Frost? Robert Frost was also accused of molesting, boys. He was a coach and agent, I want to say. And Mike Danton had actually lived with him in his house, as did Sheldon Keefe. They lived together at the time with him, and Keefe didn't have any part in this, except for the fact that they had called him in to the stand to testify against Danton in that whole thing years ago. So that was a bit of a shady thing on his past. Frost was a bit of a mind manipulator, and Keefe admitted to a lot of that, and which attributed to part of a bad attitude that he had whilst playing in the AHL, for instance, and so on. But so when it came to his first coaching job, he didn't know he wanted to do that until he wrecked his knee really badly. And then he went and he couldn't get I don't think he could get a job because of this shady past. So he went out and he bought a team. He bought a team, and that team was the CCHL's Pembroke Lumber Kings. So this is just a quick interesting story on that. So I think it's in the. So he bought that team, and then he ended up coaching it, and he took that team to 5 consecutive league championships. 5, unbelievable. And then it reached the team reached the national stage when they became the Canadian champs in 2011 after winning the RBC Cup. So Kyle Dubas heard about this. And hired him to coach the Sioux Greyhounds, which he was there for 3 years. Now that made ruffled a lot of feathers in the league and pissed a lot of people off because of his association with Frost, his past, and this and that. But Kyle Dubas said this guy's got a great record. Let's give him a shot. Kyle Dubas didn't care about that. So he coached. He did a great job with the Greyhounds. He coached them in the first year. I mean, they had a lot of issues with the team. I think they were losing a lot at the time, and blah blah blah. He fired the head coach. He hired Keefe as an intern. They lost in the first round of the playoffs in the first season he was with them. Then they lost in the second round in his second year, and then the third round in his third year. But had some really impressive regular season numbers as well. Like they went 44-17 and 0 in the second season he was with them. In the third season, 54-12 and 0. In the second season, he had a .699 winning percentage. And then in his third season, an .809 winning percentage. Overall, his winning percentage is .782. Yeah, so then he coached the Marlies, obviously, because Kyle Dubas was given the job for the Leafs. He gave Sheldon Keefe the job as the head coach, and where he coached for the past 4 years, not including this one so far. How did he do there? Pretty damn good. In the first season, he coached there. He had a .750 winning percentage. The Marlies lost in the third round of the playoffs that year. In the second season he was there, not as good. .586 win percentage. Lost in the second round there. In the third season, they had a .737 win percentage, and they won the championship that year, the Calder. I always mix up the rookie NHL award and the AHL Cup. And then the fourth season, last season he was there, they had a .599 win percentage, and they lost in the third round. Now, the team had sort of been... a lot of good players had either left or made it up to the NHL at that point, so he was left with a bit more of a skeleton crew last season. But then Kyle Dubas went ahead and got a lot of NHL players, actually a lot of veterans, to fill those ranks this season, along with a bunch of developing young players and so on and so forth. And that's the argument that you'll hear Brian Burke and a lot of other analysts for Sportsnet, TSN, and Fox and whatever say that, well, he was playing with a stacked deck in the AHL. And that's part of what he was doing so well. And this is why I'm telling you about his history in the OHL as well, and the CGAHL. This guy has a record of winning. But my argument to that, playing with the whole stacked deck scenario, is that, well, he's sort of coming into that now in Toronto as well. I know he's never coached an NHL game in his career. And he's never been an assistant coach, head coach, nada. But he's been in these kind of situations before. He's come in as intern coach. I want to say this is at least once before in his career, and a couple times when the team has been doing, not too well, and just completely turned the team around. He's been teaching a lot of Babcock systems per se in the Marlies, so that when they moved up to the LEAFS, that they were prepared for what they were going to see, that kind of thing. But he comes with, obviously, his own mindset and a very different way of communicating with players as well. He's much more flexible in the way he does things. He adapts to different situations, which is what you're looking for in a modern NHL coach. A little less arrogance and a little more understanding and the ability to work on the fly, adapt on the fly. That's the way you had to do it. I mean, you look at Barry Trotz, and he just has a system which works. But I'm sure he even adapts the way he coaches. You look at Sullivan in Boston; he's kind of the ultimate adapter. The way he I know he has a perfect line to begin with, the perfection line. But if you watch him in the playoffs, the way he does his line matches to who he throws on the ice at what point in time, defense, offense, especially everything. So we're hoping this is kind of, the latter is kind of what we're going to see in Sheldon Keefe when he makes his way to Toronto. Now they're going to play Arizona. Is it Thursday? Yeah, tomorrow. Has he been thrown a little bit into the fire here? Of course he has, but they actually had to. I mean, he could have left for an NHL job last year. Remember all those coaches that were fired? There were people looking to interview him, but Dubas threw a lot of money at Keefe and just say, please, just stay here, with the Marlies and continue coaching for another. I think last year he threw him a 2-year deal. And that was Kyle Dubas' guy. Because remember, he never hired Babcock. Lou Lamoriello did. Lou Lamoriello and Brendan Shanahan did. Brendan Shanahan, by the way, was the one that was the person who announced Mike Babcock's firing, not Kyle Dubas, which is interesting to think, okay, well, who's got the power here? Is it Dubas who fired him? Or is it Shanahan? I'm sure we'll hear more about that as the hour changes. But what do you think about this Babcock firing? Do you think it was maybe a bit too early? Do you think it was brash? I mean, a lot of the fault has to lie at the players' feet too. They just looked completely lost on the ice, uninvolved, uninspired, unmotivated, especially from a defensive perspective and special teams. So what do you think of Sheldon Keefe coming in as opposed to someone else who you think might have done a good job as the head coach. What do you think about them keeping their assistant coaches? How long do you think that's going to last for? Because I think it'll last the rest of the season at the most until things get switched up. I would think Paul McFarland's job might be a bit more safer. I think now we're going to find out how much Babcock interfered, for lack of a better word, with the special team coaches now that Sheldon Keefe is here. Is Sheldon Keefe going to let these two assistant coaches run with what they have or not? So I think we're going to get a better feel of, okay, well, is the power play or is the penalty kill going to improve? And how much of that was, maybe we'll never find out, but how much of that was Babcock interfering with the potential success of that? I don't know. In any case, this has been a really long video. It's time to go. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please hit like if you like this video. Smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. And hey, if you happen to have any Hockey Geek friends, please don't feel shy about sharing. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.